Hi, Lynn Kenyon, Everything Montana Real Estate, our whole tutorial in conjunction with Live in Montana Real Estate. I'm here today with Clint Larson from Meticulous Home Inspections. And Clint, thanks for walking us through this. This is not my listing. I have the buyer. She's on her way. And we just kind of walked through some of the things. So what we're going to walk through, this will be a long video, but this is a really important one. Inspections are vital, particularly in an old house like this. Is a 100-year-old house. And what you're buying, once you sign on the dotted line and it's yours with all its horns and whatever comes with it. So we always advise a buyer to get a home inspection. They don't have to, it's up to them entirely, but money.
Absolutely. It can save tens of thousands of dollars, anywhere from, we are a non-invasive visual inspection. So we start at the top, the roof, your chimneys, penetrations, things like that, and we go all the way from the outside of the house on the roof, siding, foundation, inside the house, doors, windows, outlets, anything that we can get our hands on to test. That's what we're here for. We're trying to find defects in electrical, be it three-prong non-grounded outlets or knob and tube wiring, things that are wired outside of junction boxes, siding that's touch in the ground, or caulking joints that are penetrations on the house that haven't been taken care of or have lacked in service over the years, and so they're cracking, pulling away. It's a top to bottom visual inspection to give you as much knowledge coming into the purchase of your home that you can have, so you know what things are something you need to take care of immediately, maybe ask for concessions in the buying process, to things that as you own the home, you're going to go back and you're going to update and you're going to take care of these smaller things so that when you down the road decide to sell the house, you have handled problems that have been brought to your attention. It makes it easier and smoother for you in the selling process.
How often do you give an inspection to a buyer and they walk away?
I don't hear all of those. I would say it's a fairly small amount, and believe it or not, typically I have walks more on your higher ends with less things than I do on the houses that are older, to where people kind of go in knowing they're buying an older house that has more things to address.
My motto is always, everything is fixable. So I know I deal with inspectors daily, and some of them just, it's the sky is falling, and some is like, well, this needs to be fixed, so
Right.
fix it. And,
Right.
and then it's up to the buyer with, if they're assuming that and knowing what they're getting into. But I was curious how many just say, yeah, no, you scare them to death. They're like, I'm not doing it.
I try not to scare people. I try to give people, the option of sitting down and talking with me or calling me once they get the inspection report, so that they can voice their concerns. I can talk them through, say, okay, this is how you're going to address this problem. This is something that is either going to be a continual issue if it is not taken care of, or it's something that you can put some elbow grease, sometimes some money in, and it'll be fixed, and you're not having to worry about it in the future. But people see things, unfortunately, they get a report that's 100 pages long, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, the house is falling in, and that's not necessarily the case. So you want to try to talk with the people, say these are what your serious issues are. These are things that you can fix down the road that really are not a big deal. Also, I like people to understand, depending on the age of the house and their market of, what they're looking at for homes, it's a very detailed process with you as the realtor to say, okay, this is what's on the market. This is what's available in your price range. What are you finding, if you're finding anything that's better, or, more often worse.
Yeah.
So that's a decision you kind of have to make.
And it's all up to the buyer. Yeah. When we're careful too. It's they're buying it. They're the ones who have to live with it. We don't want to sway them anyway. We just want them to be knowledgeable and know what they're buying. So let's walk around this one just for an example.
So foundations, here's an example of a vertical crack, and this foundation has been coated. So it's the cracking that's visibly coated. Likely there is, at least a small crack that's in the foundation. Vertical cracks happen quite frequently in, the Great Falls and Fort Benton area because there's expansive soil. If you can take a look at the driveway is cracked and heaved, and so it's uneven. So certainly there has been some movement over time, keeping in mind that this house is 100+ years old and the driveway's been here for probably the majority of that.
So it's pretty much done. You were saying vertical cracks are horizontal cracks are more notorious, more.
Horizontal cracks are worse. Vertical cracks are more common. Horizontal cracks are actually more of a red flag because of ground pressure from the outside. So a vertical crack, when you have ground pressure, you might get some waves in the wall, but it's not typically pushing something into where it's pulling away from the support structure.
Got it. We won't hit everything, but you said like wood around this on the outside. You don't
Sure,
want
they
wood.
put a wood cap on the window seals so that they could pour the concrete and it would be flush. You know, it is pressure treated, which is meant for direct ground contact, but paint on it has failed, you know, and even pressure treated at its best will eventually rot, depending upon how much moisture it sees and whether or not it's being taken care of.
The siding on the garage.
So this is asbestos siding. It's pretty common. People get really concerned when they hear the word asbestos. So certainly asbestos has been an issue. I mean, asbestosis is something that's been well advertised on television. The siding is not something that's regulated in removal. It is regulated in how you have to dispose of it, but because it's not something that fragments, meaning it powderizes when you're taking it apart, it's not as much of an inhalation hazard.
Okay.
So
the roof, I mean, when we walked, so I walked with the buyers, obviously, and this is a conventional loan, so it wasn't a concern. Had this been a VA loan or RG loan, this would have not ever passed the appraisal process, which is our next video. But T-lock shingles, they don't make them anymore. You
and
call
those
out.
actually are 3-tab that are on here.
Okay.
But 3-tabs are also of a way older generation of shingles. They are not something that is commonly in use anymore. Pretty much what you have now is going to be architectural or a metal roof. There are certain instances where people are putting like slate tile on, but a roof has to be custom engineered to put that kind of weight on it.
So on this, on your inspection, you're not going to say, hey, this is probably a $10,000 fix. You're just going to say, what are you going to say?
I'm going to say, okay, you have 3-tab shingles that are missing a large amount of aggregate. They're also starting to curl and crack. They need to be replaced. Also, you have a saddle in the roof, so you may want to consider doing some added support in the garage as far as added bracing to help make the roof stiffer. And then you're going to want to remove the shingles, which is really important. You only want 1 layer of shingles on a house at any point in time. By putting multiple layers on, you're adding extra weight to the roof. It also creates extra heat, and so it can cause your new layer of shingles to prematurely fail.
Okay. So you also pointed out this is a gas fireplace inside.
Yeah, so this was likely an old outside fireplace at some point. They've converted it to a gas fireplace when they enclosed this addition. On the top, your cap is cracked, and you also have a spot that is open where water can get in. So that's something that for sure you're going to want to seal it from the outside. You're going to want to use a real high quality type of sealant. Sikaflex is used quite often. Anything that's mortar joints, cap, you're trying to use a thin set or some type of mortar to seal those, because it is going to adhere, and it's the type of product that you want to use when you're dealing with brick, block, things of that nature. So it's important to seal this up, and you also want to kind of address the area as you're there. If it's a cold spot in the house, then you can actually remove the gas insert from the inside, and then you can spray foam the inside of this chimney area, which is going to help to seal it up, and it's also going to prevent from having that cold air intrusion in through the chimney.
So do you say all that to the buyer, or do you say have a contractor look at it?
I give those recommendations to the buyer personally to a point. I mean, there are certain things that I'll say you may want to have a licensed electrician or a licensed plumber look at these things, because that's what their licenses for. They're specialists in that. Their knowledge base, you know, over several years of being a plumber or electrician is more than mine as a inspector. Mine is more of a general knowledge, and so there are certain things that I will say, this is what you need to do to fix this, or I recommend you have a licensed professional in that.
And you're
field.
licensed.
Yes. I am licensed as an inspector through the state of Montana. I am part of InterNACHI, which is one of two inspection services that are nationwide. So we have continuing education and requirements that we have to follow through in order to become a licensed inspector through them.
And you are, in my opinion, and we're never allowed to recommend, we always give a list of inspectors. You're definitely near the top.
Well, thank
if
you.
I can say this on camera for sure. 5 hours, is that what you'll spend?
5 hours is pretty much like a bottom end. I can go through a brand new house, which I did the other day, and I was still there for 5 hours.
So that's
I
a
like
thorough
to,
inspection.
Really go through. I test every outlet I can. I test the operation of windows, doors. I'm looking for problems with weather stripping, just minute stuff, holes that are in the walls from, nails and things, minor cracks in the sheetrock, ripples in the tape. And when I say tape, that's perfect tape that they're using before the painting process. So I'm trying to find a punch list for people, so when they get my inspection, they can pull up the report, they can go back and they can say, okay, this isn't a big deal for me. This is something I can go back. A lot of people don't mind painting, don't mind spackling, stuff like that.
But you want them to be aware.
But I want you to be aware it's there.
Got it. Let's walk inside if you have a minute.
It's one of the things that caught my attention about this particular home. This floor is wood underneath. This isn't an addition that is done on concrete. So there's the potential to have moisture issues within the framework underneath. But right now it's, at the moment it's solid, and that's kind of how I'll portray that to the buyer. It's like, be aware, this is wood underneath, it's not concrete. And so you have the possibility of having moisture from the ground that occurs every spring here that can cause problems with that. If you start to feel movement changes, something different in the flooring, you want to have a further investigation done.
So water, mold, water, mold, water, mold. That's big words that
Absolutely.
We don't want to see in an inspection. Have you seen any here? What if you do see it? What do you recommend?
A small amount of water that has been on the subfloor, which I'll show you downstairs. There's several ways that you can address that. One, obviously, it can be removed and be replaced with something new. Your other options are you can put a primer sealer over the top of it, and you want to kill that first. So they have products, and most of them include bleach that are going to kill the mold, and then you want to put a primer sealer like Kills, and the oil base is preferable to the latex, but it's kind of smelly and people don't like it as much, but it tends to adhere a little bit better. It is a little bit more difficult sometimes to get other things to adhere to the oil-based Kills, but it does a better job.
So you don't recommend that somebody just specifically trained in mold abatement?
If you find it to a point, and
depends on what it is.
It's always hidden. And so when you're finding it under sinks and things like that in areas that you can't really access, then I recommend having further investigation. If it's something that's on a subfloor that's open to air, that is something that typically can be taken care of with a little bit of elbow grease.
Okay. Electrical, you said in here?
Mm-hmm.
You got
That's downstairs. So this is a three-way switch, which is pretty common for 2 points of entry. You want to have a switch at every point of entry to turn the lights on. So here it's working, functioning as it should. But if you go down to the one down below, and it depends on the way the switch is. Like right now you switch it like that, but if you turn that switch on, go ahead, it works down here. So basically that's just a wiring issue. It means that when they wired up the switch, they put the wrong wire in on the wrong screw.
So do you have to take all the drywall down to resolve that?
No. It's just a matter of pulling the switch out and switching the wires around typically.
Okay.
So they have what they call traveler wires, and they have what they call a line-in wire, and the line-in is the hot wire, and it's supposed to be on a specific screw on the switch. And so what happens if you accidentally get those switched around, then sometimes it works normally, sometimes it doesn't, to where if it's wired correctly, then it works properly all the time.
So that's just annoying. Not a safety issue.
We're checking thermostats. Nowadays, you're more often than not going to have setback thermostats. so they're more energy efficient. Your older ones are typically like a mercury switch that you're dialing on and off. So it's just set at a temperature. It's that all day long. It tends to not be as energy efficient. New construction, it can't be bigger than a 4-inch sphere that will fit through the balusters, and it's a 6-inch one that will go underneath if it has a lower lower railing. So you're looking at that so you can tell people, okay, this is what you currently have. Does it meet current standards? You may want to consider updating. This has handrails on both sides. VA loans are really picky about handrails on stairs. It's one of their red flags, along with chip and peeling paint. So there again, it's just something that we're looking for so the buyer is aware and they'll know, okay, it's a VA loan. If it's going to have an appraiser in there and it doesn't have handrails, that's something that's going to get going to come
Well,
up.
it's not, the sooner you know that, the better, so you can put it on your report.
And I may be incorrect, and this is more your area, but when people accept a VA loan offer, they're aware of the fact that there are things that they have to fix in order to meet VA standards.
Yeah, but I always put in mind when I'm representing a buyer or a seller, unless it's extraordinary. Like if they called out a foundation, the $50,000 foundation, you're not going to necessarily fix that.
Right.
So it's got to be within reason.
Sure.
But yeah, I always inform my sellers, okay, if you're taking a VA loan, yeah, you've got to have handrails, no chipping and peeling paint, no T-lock shingles, those things that are the biggest flags for sure.
Sure.
But things come up sometimes that nobody had any idea about, of
Right.
course, and that's why we're here with you, because that's what you're trying to uncover.
Sure.
So yeah, definitely.
I also do sewer scopes as part of my inspection if people want it. This house is going to get one. I haven't done it yet, but what you find on older homes in the Great Falls, Fort Benton area, you will find a lot of cast iron, what they call clay tile. There's also another product that they use. It's called Orangeburg, and Orangeburg is basically tar-infused wood pulp. It was really common around World War II, but it kind of has a shelf life. After a while, the tar kind of dries out, as does the pipe. Roots and stuff can get in there. The pipe starts to oval out, or either from top to bottom or from side to side. Orangeburg is one of those things that you want to be aware of. One, if your sewer goes bad, a replacement of a sewer is probably starting at $10,000 and just goes up from there.
Yeah, we always recommend a sewer scope anymore. It's a pricey fix.
Yeah,
and it's cash.
Yep,
Chemical
exactly.
get a loan on it. Yeah.
And so when you have clay tile, typically you get root intrusions. So if you have a lot of trees on your property, when you run the camera down, you're going to see roots that grow into the joints of the pipe. Sometimes they can completely occlude the pipe. So you have backups of whatever you're flushing down your toilet or whatever you're running down your sink drain or your washing machine drain. Those things are building up in there, and it potentially can back up all the way inside the house. Now, obviously, we're limited to what we can see from the clean out in the main sewer pipe, so you can't necessarily see what might be in a floor drain, like a floor drain that's an old cast or galvanized pipe may have rusted out, so you won't see those because they're a smaller pipe than what I can fit the camera in, but you're looking for the really big expense of replacing an entire sewer line.
Yeah, that's no fun. Some insurances address these things, but
correct,
not always. Yeah.
And a lot of times, I know for sure in Great Falls, they offer a service line policy. Once you sign up for city water, it's not actually through City of Great Falls, but it is an insurance policy that you can purchase that will pay for cleanings, and it will pay up to a certain amount to assist in the cost of a sewer replacement or a sewer patch repair. Like if you have just a section that's 10 or 20 feet long that's bad, they can dig that up and do just a patch in it, and it's more cost effective, and so you don't end up spending that money necessarily out of pocket. It's a fairly inexpensive insurance policy if you have the clay tile or the Orangeburg pipe.
So you may discover you've got one of these kind of pipes, and then it's working fine.
Correct.
But you want to ensure in the future if something happened that
absolutely
you're taken care of. Yeah.
And so whether the pipe is currently clean, which you will find, and the clay tile is pretty durable. Most of the issues with that are, chips are cracks where the hub connection comes together, root intrusions, bellies because the ground settles a little bit, so your bellies will have water in it, which those are things that just kind of can slow the progress of debris as it goes out to the city main. Your Orangeburg, like I said, is kind of a shelf life item. As it gets older, it just gets worse. And so it's a for sure eventual replacement. The clay tile, they can last a long time, more than my lifespan for sure. And just because you have clay tile doesn't mean that it's bad. I've seen several of them that are in good shape, that don't have roots. And there's some that do, and you can clean the roots out and they look brand new. So just because it has clay tile doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it's something that you want to be aware of so that it's something that you can address ahead of time.
Okay. So you're looking very carefully in bathrooms because
Bathrooms, kitchens are always places you're really looking for mold. You're looking at the caulking, around the tub, spots where it's cracking, pulling away. That's a water issue or potential water issue. Hard water buildup. How they have the caulking or the finishing done above the shower enclosure, type of enclosure that is there. This is a cast iron tub, but it's got a fiberglass 3-piece panel inset. So you always want to make sure that that caulking is done and sealed everywhere because obviously you're having water in the shower every day. We're also checking, does the toilet flush properly? Does it fill? Does it shut off? Is there hot water and cold water at all the fixtures? It's required to have one or the other. In Montana, we prefer to have both or at a minimum a fan because the fan is to mitigate the humid air. People think all the time that the fan's more for when you're using the toilet. That's not the case. The fan is there to try to prevent having moisture buildup inside the bathroom. And so with just a window, when it's cold outside, people aren't opening the window while they're showering. Right. So you don't have that way
so it's nice to have both.
To get rid of, the humidity that builds up in the room.
Makes sense. Okay. You look at pipes, you're going to look under the sink?
Yep. We check to see what type of plumbing there is under the sink, what type of P-trap, whether it's metal or PVC, whether or not there's angle stops, which are shutoffs. This doesn't have them. So underneath here, that's going to be something that gets written up because you don't have a way to shut the water off if you need to work on it. So you can shut the water off to the entire house, but if you wanted to just change a faucet out, it would be way more convenient to be able to just shut it off under the sink, change it out. So you have doors that have been damaged, that's going to be on the report. It's a cosmetic issue, but basically it's a cost to the new buyer if they're going to have to replace doors to make it so that, it's the way they want it to be, The newer they make it, obviously the more money it's worth for them if they're at a resale standpoint. Kitchens are a big one. Excuse me. We check all the appliances, run the dishwasher, turn all the burners on the stove, turn the oven on, make sure the oven's working. Check the disposal to make sure it's working. Is it excessively loud? Does it not work at all? If it has an ice maker, is the water hooked up? Is it making ice? This is an electric stove. For gas stoves, we're trying to make sure that it has an angle shut off, a 90-degree angle shut off. Is it hooked up with a flex connector? So those are all things that you're looking for to try to make sure that that's been done properly. Obviously with an older home, you may not have the flex connectors. It may be a rigid connector depending on how old the appliances are. 100-year-old house probably doesn't have original appliances, so that's likely been changed. We check the ventilation. So you're turning the fans on, you're making sure that the fans actually run, checking lights.
And this is a duplex, so you're doing that for both, obviously.
Yes.
Okay.
So this one's actually vented outside. Not all of them are that way. Some of them have recirculating fans, which just have charcoal filters underneath. Either way is acceptable. It's just more of a dependence. The charcoal filter ones tend to have more buildup inside, and so it's something you want to clean the filters every so often. So this is an attic space that's been converted to living space. Happens fairly frequently. One thing to keep in mind, typically your older homes are 2x4s for your ceiling joists. So that's only 3.5 inches of insulation, which at best you're about an R15 for R value. Typically current standards for new construction, you're looking for like an R49. So you can see there's a big discrepancy there.
Huge, yeah.
And so this is areas that can be cold or can allow heat loss out.
So your utilities are going to be higher.
So exactly. So it's something just to be aware of. It's nice to have the extra living space, but the other side is we can't get into these to see what's there. Now, it's possible that they use spray foam. Spray foam is going to actually give you a higher R value, but because it's something that's buried behind the paneling, we can't tell you for sure what's there, but it's just something that's likely going to have higher energy costs just based on the fact that it's just not enough room to have that R49 insulation. Okay. You will typically have more here because it's flat, and potentially more depending on what they've done with the walls. These have a lot of built-ins, so these areas aren't going to be heavily insulated just because there's nowhere to put it.
Okay. Anything else up?
You talked about a smoke alarm. So we test all the smoke detectors that we find, and we just typically test them with a button. This one's not working. It's likely that it's probably a battery, but if you change the battery and it doesn't work, it's a good idea to swap the smoke alarm out. You're required to have smoke alarms on every level. Newer construction, it's every bedroom. Common areas are required to have one for the common area. So as we go through the home inspection, we're trying to find and make sure that they have at least the minimum. And then we check them to make sure they're working. And if they're not, that's a red flag, just so that they know to change the battery or to make the smoke detector work, because obviously if a fire starts, that's your first point of warning.
CO2?
CO2, we certainly like to see CO2 on any of your newer smoke detectors is typically incorporated with the smoke detector. CO2 is really mostly important like down in your furnace area, because your furnace is what's burning the oxygen in the air, so it's more likely the CO2 is going to be an issue in your utility room with the furnace running or your water heater versus up in your sleeping areas. But if you like to have the added security of having the CO2, they sell those that just plug into outlets, and you can plug them in outside of rooms or inside rooms, and it's just an added way to give you some advance notice.
Great.
So when we talk about mold or water issues, there's a spot that's over here that's underneath a bathroom. Clearly here's the plumbing. So this has seen water before with the water stains you're seeing. So it's something that we're going to poke around with, see if it's the flooring, like the wood has actually rotted out. And you can feel that rotted wood, you can kind of just pick away with your fingernail. If it's solid still, structurally it would be fine, but it would be something that you would want to bleach and then apply a sealer over the top of it.
Okay.
You also have things on plumbing, like this is a water connection, but hard water typically will build up on connections, depending on what part of town you're in, or whether you're on a well. Typically wells have way more hard water and are more likely to have issues. Our newer plumbing with PEX piping and stuff, that's less likely to be an issue, and copper certainly typically isn't bad, but you certainly can have water build up and hard water on copper as well.
So looks like an older furnace. How do you call this? What do you say about this?
Basically, I'm going to pull this off and I'm going to fire the furnace up and make sure that it has actually got air going to all the vents in the house. So you can actually feel air coming out of the vents. I'm checking the furnace filter, which is on the side, seeing if that filter is dirty or clean. If your filter is dirty, it makes your furnace work harder, which is going to lessen the life of your furnace. We'll have a data plate on it. It will tell me how old it is. That will also be included in the report.
And what's a useful life for a furnace?
Furnace lives, I've seen furnaces that are 70, 80 years old that I couldn't even date even. But a lot of it depends on how well you maintain your furnace. Are you changing the filter regularly? Are you having, the furnace cleaned every year or two or something by a professional? They come in and they're going to lube up your motors and they're going to clean it and they're going to make sure that everything is operating properly. Most of your furnaces you can still buy parts for. So you have things like thermocouples that are what heats up to start your furnace. Those can be replaced. Sometimes the computer boards can be replaced depending on how new it is. Your older furnaces typically are a manually lit pilot light. There's not as much to go wrong. You can have gas valves that go bad, things like that, but they are typically have fewer things to go wrong, but they don't run nearly as efficiently.
Okay. All right, what else are we looking at here?
Show you another electrical thing while we're right here. This house at some point in time has had knob and tube. So knob and tube
Big no-no.
is something that, as long as the entire house is knob and tube, that was what it came with originally. We cannot write that up as an inspector. But if it has been changed, it should be changed completely. So
You can't write that up as an inspector.
I'll write up that that's what it is,
But you
I
can't give
can't
advice on it.
flag it as being, excuse me, I can't flag it as being faulty just because it's knob and tube. So when knob and tube came out, that was kind of the accepted way to do electricity. And so as long as it is original to the structure, I can recommend that you may want to at some point update it.
So none of this is functional then, is what you're
Not
saying?
that I've found. I mean, when you see all these other wires that are here, those are updated. As you look at the group that you're looking at, the cloth wires are an older version, typically a non-grounded Romex. The white is a 14 gauge, most likely 2-wire with a ground. And so as electrical progresses over the years, it becomes more stringent in what it is required. And your electrical wires all are grounded. They now have arc faults and GFCIs and all that kind of stuff that are
These older
required
houses
in
don't,
newer
yeah.
construction.
Right, got it. Okay. So they covered the walls here, so if there was something, you can only do a visual inspection.
Right.
You wouldn't know.
That is true.
If we
And
had
that's
vertical,
one thing that you just never really, you hate that you can't inspect everything, but things are covered up quite often, especially in basements where they're doing finish work.
so if there was an issue though, you'd feel the floor and that sort of thing.
Typically you'll feel some unevenness in the floor. Sometimes you can really feel it. So as you're walking around, that's something that you're feeling for while you are walking.
Would you call that out? Would you say,
Absolutely.
I feel like the floor is uneven?
So on that particular part of the report, that's the slab foundation. And so you're going to say there are uneven spots or hollow spots in the floor that can be felt while being walked on. Well, I can't say for sure what those are. They're likely due to settling cracks. If they get worse, it's definitely something you need to have a licensed engineer or a professional come out and try to give you a solution to the problem.
Okay.
Here's another example, something pretty basic most people don't think about. This is actually an exterior door to the outside, but it's an interior door jamb. So this is not designed to be in this location. It has no weather stripping, so it's going to be a cold spot. So that's going to be something that's written in the report that is recommended that you put an actual exterior door with a threshold and weather stripping.
Okay.
You're always hoping that you have some of these, like this is exterior walls that you can actually physically see the concrete so that you get a better idea. When they put this door in, it was likely an afterthought. And so some of this that you see that's cracked, it's because they opened this up. And this mesh here tells me that that's what they're putting on in order to put the coating on the top of the foundation. Right here, you can see a little bit
So
of cracking.
if you saw this without a door, that would be a flag, but the fact that they probably caused it, the
It's
cracking.
certainly something that was probably caused when they put the door in. You can see over here on the side that you're on, if you step over for just a second, this looks like, at first glance like some residual cracking, but you can't actually see the crack. So it's partly just the coating that's on there. This looks different, but this is how they used to form concrete back in the day. It was just individual boards versus now they have huge forms. And so when you see the difference along the concrete, that's really what the cause is. You see some spalling down here at the bottom, and spalling is basically where the outside finish of the concrete has flaked off. A lot of times that can be from a problem that we call efflorescence. Efflorescence is where moisture from the ground actually works like the capillaries in your body, and it creeps up into the foundation, and then it will go away. And so as it goes, it kind of expands and contracts, and then what can happen is that outside finish can fall off.
Okay. So now we're closing up this inspection segment of Everything Montana Real Estate. Emily, the buyer, joined us. She was here earlier, but these are long. I mean, especially Clint's are long inspections. I mean, some of these guys will go 2 hours and they're through it. So
it's
now,
worth it in the long run.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
he has a whole list. What's that list on your phone of things he's looking for? And so what he will do now, you will go through. You finish this today. You'll send her the things you found.
Right, it'll come out in a PDF, and you know, on my report I have roofing, exterior, site and ground, which includes grading. So you want to make sure there's not negative grading towards the house. That's where something is going to cause water issues potentially in a basement or a crawl space. It's doors, sidings, exterior window, trim, you know, stuff that you're looking for.
Maybe show him that. Yeah, here's his list of things, and it's pretty exhaustive.
You know, this is what my list looks like that I go through for every report. Now, some of the stuff is rooms that you may or may not have in a home, but typically most of these are hit, you know, every time I do an inspection.
So he'll give her, so what's going to happen is he'll go through. As agents, I like to at least show up and see kind of the mate, because you'll know, he knows right away. Not all agents can. I mean, so the beauty of it is he will give her this PDF. He'll share it with us as an agent. And then we go through with Emily and say, okay, can you live with this? Are you, is this a deal breaker? Do you have to have this fixed? And now this is the negotiation from the standpoint of a buyer. So she's going to say, no, I'm not putting up with all these broken windows, or I want the fireplace fixed, or we knew the roof. That's a pricey one. So are they going to pay $10,000 or $8,000 or whatever? They're probably not. So then you negotiate. So he gives an inspection within your buy sell. When you make an offer, you have a day the inspection is supposed to be done by. So as soon as that passes, then it's the negotiation period. So then we're going to go, so you're going to get this and you're going to say, okay, I can live with this. I can't live with this. I want this fixed. We present that to the seller, and then he says, I'll do XYZ, but I won't do PDQ.
Okay.
Or, I mean, you're pretty chill. I know it's an old house. I'm fine with it. It's whatever. And some sellers say, no, this is a great market. If you don't buy it, somebody else will.
Exactly.
Just depends on the seller, or I knew it was an old house and that was a problem. I'm willing to do this. Home warranties have become a very, very hot solution. You've got a lot of appliances. You've got an older furnace. It costs the seller $500 or whatever it is for a year for a home warranty, and those cover appliances and furnaces and hot water heaters. That's a pretty easy thing to ask for, that just as a safety net. I always like to.
Absolutely.
Obviously, if you have a $10,000 sewer fix, that's got to be addressed, and that's going to be
rough.
And sometimes the seller can't do it. He says, I don't have $10,000 either. So this is where you really get into the crux of why these are important, and it's going to go completely what the seller's attitude is, what the buyer's attitude is.
Absolutely.
And can you meet in the middle? Can you, it's going to just be, you're going to negotiate it and live with what you can. And always, like we were talking about, if the loan requires it. Now, you're a conventional loan, so they're not going to be as particular with the chipping and peeling paint.
Absolutely.
So they have to do that if they want you to give them a loan at closing. So give them cash at closing. So these are all things that we as agents, we don't know where it's going to turn out. I mean, he could give you a report today, and here's your money for this report, thank you, and you say, no, I'm not doing it, I'm walking away. So you're out that inspection cost.
Okay.
The seller doesn't pay for it, but now for the 5, 6, 7, whatever it is to have the inspection, that's pretty good insurance to know that you didn't spend all this money on a house that had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of fixes.
And that's why they have that small window, so you can get in here and make sure that taken care of before you go in and buy, and you're not like, oh, at the end, you know, no kidding.
Right, and some people waive inspections. Again,
Yeah.
we talked about that in the beginning. That's not advised. That's why, you know, and you've been busy and it's been hard to get somebody up here.
Oh, yes.
I want you to have an inspection. I want,
Me
because
too.
I don't want you to call me in 2 months and go, Lynn, I didn't know that that's not, I want
you
you to
don't
be
wanna hear that.
thrilled. And if you call me and say, hey, there was a vertical or whatever, well, yeah, right, he told you that.
Right.
I'm sorry you didn't hear it, whatever. So be aware.
Honestly, that's everywhere.
I mean, yeah. Then this
It's
is
not
an
too
old home,
shabby.
so it was a
Yeah.
really good one, I think, to do this walkthrough because
Absolutely.
the things that Clint is pointing out are going to come up in a lot of these old homes. You knew you were buying an old home.
Yep.
If you could afford $1 million new home, you probably would have bought that, or maybe you don't want $1 million new
don't
home.
want
There's
$1 million
problems
new
with that too. So anyway, so it's all a huge part of the process of buying, and I'm glad that you were able to get Clint out here, and now you and I
as
will
well,
talk.
yeah.
Now we have a timeline though. We gotta give him the
Every
notice.
single person within close range here, and you're the only person that gave me a call back, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, so we'll come up with
question,
your
too.
yes.
They have concessions oftentimes for closing, right? So like, let's say she had a $10,000 sewer. They didn't have $10,000 necessarily to just put into it. They could say, okay, well, we'll give you $10,000 off potentially the cost of the home that you can apply towards that. Is that correct?
So you can do a holdback, but it has to be the lender has to
Okay.
approve it. If they think there's something maybe that's going to be a big issue, and this is their security against the loan, that can be, underwriters may reject it. So, like, well, a great example is roofs in Montana. You can't put a new roof on in December.
Right.
Oh,
So if they say the roof's
There's
bad
no way to
and we're
try.
not loaning until you get the new roof on, they're going to put 1.5 times a high bid aside at closing. And then when it gets nicer, then they'll put the new roof on. And lenders they're fine with that. If you find a bad roof in July, then that's a much tougher deal for the lender to agree to that.
Gotcha.
Again, you're a conventional loan. We knew going into it you had a bad roof. You know, it's up to you. If you want to ask for it, you can certainly ask for it.
I was like,
You're the buyer.
I believe it's fairly fixable.
Yeah, and I mean his report is going to really tell you everything, and then you sit down and talk with your boyfriend and decide what you can and cannot live with, and then
Sounds good.
we have we have to give the notice within a certain time period. Then we have to go back and forth. So we have like a window there to talk to the seller and say, well, I don't know what a new roof costs. I'm not going to tell you I'll pay for a new roof. What if it's $20,000? So then sometimes the seller will go back and get some bids and say, yeah, I can live with this. I can't live with this, or I'll just reduce the price, which I never recommend reducing the price because now you don't have the cash to do the fix.
Yeah.
And this loan over 30 years is, you know, if it's a $10,000 roof, you'd rather have the $10,000 and get it done.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's cash
immediately.
out of your pocket. And that's a whole
Absolutely.
nother philosophy, sold enough stuff that you don't want to just reduce your price. You'd rather get the stuff fixed because otherwise you're going to have to come up with all that money to do it. And your money's in your down payment and your closing costs. So
Yeah, you mentioned the last time the sewer was done here was like 4 to 6 years ago. and
Oh, is
that's
that
a long
right?
time.
yeah, well,
Like,
we're
ooh.
hoping. Let's cross our fingers the
Yeah.
sewer's good. But anyway, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
We still have
Thank
a
you for
little bit
having
to
me.
go. We have to go with you. We'll wait and see what your report is. But I think this gives viewers really a good idea of what your process is, why you want an inspection. Once you've done an inspection, you have no rights. It's all
It's
between
worth
you.
it.
Yeah, it is worth it, and it's between you and the seller. So anyway, thanks.
Absolutely.
We'll see what happens.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Cliff.
Yep, thank
Look
you.
forward to your report. So Lynn Kenyon, Everything Montana Real Estate. Thanks for joining us. I knew this was going to be a long one. This is an old house, but really important things for you to understand when you're buying a house, to understand the whole process, to see, I mean, not everything that Clint looks at is in this house, but a lot of it was. And so having an inspector, understanding what a sewer scope is and the importance of a sewer scope, and then what the process is after you get this inspection, what you do, and what your rights are, what you can ask for, you can ask for anything, what you can expect from a seller. And this is buyer or seller. Sellers should also watch this. This is going to come up in your home, and it's up to you if you want to work with how badly you want the deal to go. You want to play hardball, or do you want to do some things that probably subsequent buyers are also going to ask for? So anyway, thank you for joining us, Lynn Kenyon. This is Everything Montana Real Estate, our series on home purchasing and selling. in conjunction with Live in Montana Real Estate. I'm the broker of Live in Montana Real Estate. I really see a need for this, and I hope you're enjoying them, and we look forward to showing you other aspects of buying.